Good morning. I'm Jennifer Rabb, and for more than 21 years, I've had the incredible privilege of serving as the president of the incredible Hunter College, where the American dream has been coming true for more than a century and a half. So it is truly fitting that we should gather today to celebrate International Human Rights Day at Hunter's extraordinary Roosevelt House. On behalf of Harold Holzer, our Jonathan Fanton director, and Rita Hauser, the chair of our advisory board, we are so pleased to welcome all of you here today and those of you on Zoom. As most of you know, this Public Policy Institute is the one-time home of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. During their residency here, it was the site of much discussion and much historic progress on human rights. Here, just a few floors upstairs in his small private library, following his 1932 landslide victory for the White House, President-elect FDR and his brain trust hammered out the building blocks of the New Deal. And as we know, they included tangible action on human rights, the rights of the disabled, the unemployed, working people, and the elderly to receive government support they needed to maintain their families and preserve their dignity. We are so proud that such milestones enter the American way of life right here in this landmark Roosevelt House. As for Eleanor, who championed the idea of selling the house to Hunter more than 90 years ago, her name has become all but synonymous with human rights, and deservedly so. It was Eleanor who, after her husband's death, led the drafting process for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations on December 10, 1948, 74 years ago this weekend. In fact, the years of meetings and negotiations over the package, chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, first got underway at Hunter College in Gillette Hall on the old Bronx campus. And it was here in our own North Building on Park Avenue, in that auditorium on our main campus, that Eleanor Roosevelt spoke to more than 2,000 people, plus a radio audience of millions, I guess that time's Zoom, on the importance of supporting the work of the UN. Today and every day, we honor this legacy here at Roosevelt House through our nationally recognized human rights undergraduate program led by the extraordinary Jessica Newworth. And I want to ask everyone to give Jessica a round of applause for all she did for putting today together. Under Jessica's guidance as the Rita Hauser director of our program, we are educating the next generation of human rights advocates and preparing them for the great challenges that lie ahead. In fact, all of Hunter counts itself as fully committed to human rights. Our first ever Rhodes Scholars, 2 in just 4 years, were brought here by their parents as refugees, first from Haiti and then Nepal, to escape persecution and seek opportunity, which they did first at Hunter and then as Rhodes Scholars at Oxford's. In recent months, we've been privileged to shelter and host here a professor from Kabul University. Her arrival was part of a rescue program sponsored by the generous Bentheim family and managed by Martha Bragan of our Silverman Social Work School. As soon as the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, Dr. Bragan led an effort to rescue scholars from Kabul University, and we are so glad to have welcomed this inspiring scholar in residence, Dr. Rihana Fakiri, who is here with us, and we hope you have a chance to meet her over the next few months. The Hunter motto is Mihi Kura Futuri, the care of the future is mine, and we take it literally when it comes to human rights. Recently, our efforts have also included welcoming an LBGT rights scholar from Brazil who, if he had to go home, faced deep peril. He is now part of our art history program. And over the last year, we put out a big, wide Facebook call for students in the Ukraine and Russia. If their English was strong enough and they had the grades, we welcomed them to come apply to Hunter and made their way here easier. 6 have come this semester, and another 6 are on their way. So we are proud to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. As we all know, we are sadly bearing witness to human rights crisis all over the world. In Ukraine, as I said, where visual evidence of war crime has been flooding our airwaves. In Afghanistan, where girls are not allowed to go to school. And in Iran, where we see young women standing up for their rights at the risk of their freedom and even their lives. In Congo, in the midst of an unending civil war, women and girls still fall victim to sexual terror. But heroes emerge, and Roosevelt House has been proud on 2 separate occasions to host Nobel Peace Prize winner Dr. Denis Mukwege to bring these stories to our students, our faculty, and the wider public, again, as another scholar in residence. As the words inspired on the back of the wall behind you remind us every day, FDR said them and we swear by them. We remain committed to preserving freedom from fear and want and the freedom to speak and worship everywhere in the world. And let's not forget that here in the United States we face human rights challenges as well. The poisonous fruits of anti-Semitism, white supremacy, sexism, ageism, and homophobia, which sometimes manifests horrifically in gun violence, intimidation, and voter suppression. As Eleanor Roosevelt famously said, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home. Here at home, Roosevelt House, and everywhere at Hunter, we remain committed to addressing these violations and inequities, and we're so fortunate that our great Governor, Kathy Hochul, is committed to protecting women, children, and others who require the full force of government to secure the privileges of residence and citizenship. And that's why we're so delighted to partner with the Governor and with the New York State Division of Human Rights, led by our good friend, the wonderful Commissioner Maria Imperial, for today's important and inspiring event. We're delighted also to welcome our keynote speaker we'll hear from a bit later, the President of Transformative Justice Coalition, Barbara Arwine. So Barbara, thank you again for being here. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaims that all people are born equal in both dignity and in rights. Eleanor Roosevelt envisioned a world where everyone on the planet has the right to live free from violence and discrimination, where everyone enjoys the rights to education, employment, health care, and well-being. We share this vision, and every day in so many ways we will commit ourselves anew to what we hope will be a better world. And so now it is a great pleasure to bring up to the podium Maria Imperial, our wonderful commissioner for the New York State Division of Rights, someone who has made a difference in all of her professional and community engagement commitments. She's a force of nature when it comes to human rights and community action. From her work at Safe Horizon Victim Services to her leadership of the City Bar Justice Center to her dozen years as the transformative CEO of the Westchester YWCA. I am so proud to call Maria a dear friend from our time at Harvard Law School together and to have watched her make such an impactful difference in human rights and in social justice in New York State. We thank the Governor again for letting us host this event and bringing Maria here with us today. Maria Imperial.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you all for being here. As Jennifer said, I'm Maria Imperial, and it's my honor to serve as the Commissioner of the State Division of Human Rights. And I'm especially honored to be part of Kathy Hochul's historic administration. One of the privileges of this position is the opportunity to collaborate with some of the country's most extraordinarily talented, accomplished, and inspirational people, which is the case again today. I'd like to thank President Raab, Hunter College, the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute, and the team here, Harold Holter, Jessica Neuwirth, Katrina Avila, and also the DHR team, Manny Katorum, and also Krista Kalachuram. Thank you. In particular, again, would like to recognize President Raab for her leadership of this college for the past 2 decades. Under her leadership, Hunter has become a model of excellence for public universities across our country while remaining the largest college in the CUNY system. I'm going to go off script now. I see the staff starting to get nervous. But Jennifer, I've known you for 40 years, and more than knowing you, I've admired you, and I've always inspired to be like you. Ever since I was an urban fellow working at the Bronx Office of City Planning, and you were a special assistant to Herb Sturs. I could see back then and see now that what a mover and shaker you are. You're a true woman warrior. We met again at Harvard Law School and knew then that we had to stick together since there weren't many students there from the Bronx or from Washington Heights. Today I wore purple. It's DHR's color, but I also wore it in honor of you. Because every single day here at Hunter College, you did bleed purple. Okay, so the division, the division looks forward to hopefully continuing this partnership and to continue to partner with you on many human rights initiatives. Keeping in the vein of people who inspire me, it's my pleasure to now introduce our next speaker, Barbara Arnwine. Barbara is the founder and president of the Transformative Justice Coalition and president emeritus of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law. As a graduate of Scripps College and Duke University School of Law, Barbara has done everything from fighting for fair housing across our country, championing women's rights, especially issues involving intersectionality and African American women and girls, to, most famously perhaps, combating voter suppression as a founder of Election Protection, the nation's largest nonpartisan voter protection coalition. Currently, she also serves as co-chair and facilitator of the National Commission for Voter Justice, the Millennial Votes Matters convenings, and the Voting Rights Alliance. Barbara was also a key figure in the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1991 and the 2006 reauthorization of provisions of the Voting Rights Act, and has taught at Columbia University School of Law. She is recipient of numerous awards, including being co-honored with Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg with the Charles Hamilton Houston Medallion and receiving the Gruber International Justice Prize for her excellence in defending and promoting civil rights and gender equity throughout our country. Please join me in welcoming Barbara Arnwine.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for that introduction, Maria. Thank you, everyone, for having me today and for coming to speak to you on such an amazing day, right? Brittany Griner is coming home. That is the best news. Her suffering has really impacted so many people. I've been amazed at how many people have cried to me talking about her and not able to tolerate the thought of her suffering more. So what a wonderful day this is. I want to thank the office of the Lieutenant Governor of the state of New York. I want to thank the Roosevelt House for Public Policy Institute for having me. I want to thank the New York State Division of Human Rights, of course, for having me here today. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Harold. Thank you for everything. Thank you for having me. You know, I just arrived here last night from Georgia. And like many of you, I stayed up watching Steve Kornacki at the board. And, they had to, go through all of the gyrations of the counting. But I'm going to talk a lot about our democracy, its state, and where we are now in this fight. But before I do that, I just want to say a little bit about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I have testified before the UN too much. Testified regarding United States compliance with treaties and conventions, not only here at the UN, but also, of course, in Geneva on several occasions. Worked a lot with the High Commissioners for Human Rights over the years. Been part of too many of the international convenings all over the world. And so when I talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's not just a object. It's not just a document. It's not just words on a page. It is a document that I fought to make real, to actualize its promise to people, to really look at it. And whenever I look at it, I am always horribly reminded that many of the contradictions of the 1940s that compelled Eleanor Roosevelt to write that document remain with us. It's sad to say that I can't look at the document when I read all 30 rights and say, oh, it's done. Because so much of that fight still is alive and remains with us. And then we have new threats, right? We have our, we have our devolving Supreme Court of the United States. And Dobbs, when you read the Dobbs decision, as I was reading through again the 30 rights that are embodied in the Universal Declaration, I realized how Dobbs is actually tearing at the fabric of so many of those rights. And if you go through it, you start realizing how many of those rights actually are within the targeting of delegitimizing rights that we get out of the Dobbs decision. I think that we have to remember that when you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, when it was written, think about the times it was written. This is post the failure, right, of the League of Nations. I've always thought every time I'm in Geneva and I'm standing before the Woodrow Wilson home, his palace, as they call it, and the hotel, I'm always reminded of how did he start the League of Nations when he was such a racist. You have to look at that contradiction. A man who sent his wife repeatedly into the federal sector to different offices to see how many people of color were employed and to figure out ways to get them unemployed. When you look at the showing of the birth of a nation and his heralding of that horrible, horrific anti-black film, when you look at so much that he did, I wondered, where did he ever come up with a concept of the League of Nations? And at the same time, I'm not surprised it failed. When we get to this era of the writing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we have to look at it in its time. We got to understand it was a radical document, radical, unheard of. But it was also a document, when you read it, of its time, right? It's one that's founded in the era of rampant, absolutely pervasive white racial superiority. Millions, post-World War II, millions of Jews who have been slaughtered, millions of people of different nationalities slaughtered throughout Europe, a devastated Europe, still smoking from the ashes of the bombing, the occupations, a world where brutal, racist, dehumanizing colonialization was accepted. And indeed, as we know from the fight over that document, one of the biggest fights was over the anti-colonialism clauses that people wanted to insert, that were rejected, of course, ultimately, and the clauses that people wanted to insert over the right to self-determination that were the biggest fights over the document that was also rejected. It's not one of the rights that you see enumerated. But it also was a world where women were viewed as unequal, where LGBTQIA rights, nowhere in this document, right? Unheard of. A world of apartheid, segregation by caste, by race, by nationality. In the United States, it's the pre-civil rights movement era. There is no Montgomery boycott when it's written, no Rosa Parks, no Civil Rights Act of 1964, no Voting Rights Act of 1965, no Equal Rights Amendment. We still don't have it because of, even though it was proposed as early as 1923 and all the 1972 machinations back and forth later, no LGBTQIA rights. It would be 1969 before Stonewall would happen here in New York and inspire people to start talking about gay and lesbian and transgendered and queer and intersectional, sexual, and all kinds of other rights. But we have to say that the one beauty of the Universal Declaration of Rights, because I've seen it quoted in so many places where people have stood up, and faced their own governments and talked about their human rights, and they always start with the Universal Declaration of Rights. So I know that it is also a wellspring of what? Hope. It is a cornerstone for fighting for expanded human rights. It is a document that people rely upon all the time to hold them up when they are fighting injustice. So in our time, we still know that we live in a perilous era where human rights are constantly being trod upon. We know that, sadly, we have watched the governmental killings of economic and environmental activists, political opponents, human rights defenders, journalists. We have noticed that, Russia, the People's Republic of China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Nicaragua, and Syria, and of course, Iran, when you look at the 2021 report of human rights in the world and the worst violations in the world and our best progress, you see these things really overwhelmingly. And we also see, even here in the United States, a growing anti-movement for protesting, abuses of peaceful protesters demanding democracy and fundamental freedoms. And we see it not only in Burma, not only in Belarus, not only in Cuba, not only in Hong Kong and Sudan, but as was pointed out earlier, in Iran, in the fight of Iranian women. But, at the same time, you have some incredibly interesting signs of progress. Botswana decriminalizing same-sex relations. Turkmenistan pardoning of Jehovah's Witnesses, having more religious freedom. You see some words of progress. But as a world, as a global community, the one thing I noticed, I was just in Europe a couple of months ago, is that we still, as a global community, are fighting over this concept of democracy. And we're fighting autocrats. We're fighting racists. I was just shocked, not shocked, it always happens when I'm in Europe, to see, some form of vicious, ugly, racism asserting itself, and being reminded of how much work we got to do. I just wanted to say that, when we look at the Declaration, think about one thing. If we were writing it now, how would it look? What would be different in what we would have said in that Declaration? I have no doubt it would have been different if we were writing it in this day, because we lived through all these decades since its publication. We lived through all of the contradictions of our governments with these declarations. So we would think that, things would be so different. But I want to just say that when you read the Declaration, you also realize human rights, that there is nothing more fundamental to human rights. Of all the 30 rights delineated, just like the Supreme Court said in so many of its decisions, nothing is more prescriptive, nothing is more powerful in a democracy than the right to vote. And we aren't there yet. And the United States, we love to think of ourselves as the leaders of democracy, yet our failures are exploited all the time in international arenas and international discussions to to help support autocrats and anti-democracy movements. So I want us to be very clear that as we fight and as we celebrate human rights worldwide, as we seek to build this community of no boundaries, no borders, this community where everybody is treated with respect and dignity, where race, nationality, gender have no consequence to your ability to strive, we still have to understand that democracy is in peril, that it is under attack, under assault. And we know that I call them the anti-democracy forces, they don't want us to be able to vote for representatives of our choice, nor for policies of our choice. They're restricting rights, but, I always crack up because people talk about conventional wisdom, and I always say it's neither conventional nor is it wise. Some grandmas have better sense than a whole lot of pundits. And I would say that it's fascinating that when people were talking about a red wave, I was one of the few people who said that's nonsense. And they looked at me and said, oh, you really gone crazy now. And I said, no, it's just you don't understand what's happening with Americans. You got to be on the ground talking, working with people all the time to have a real sense of what's going on. And I predicted that they were wrong. I said not only will Dems hold, because we're nonpartisan, but I'm just doing fundamental political analysis. I said not only will the Dems hold the Senate, they will gain a seat or two. I said there's no doubt about it. I said the House is going to be close. I said I'm surprised. I said I'm surprised everybody thinks that they might not hold the House. I said but there's a real possibility. Why? Why did I say that? Because what people underestimate in our democracy is young people. There's a fundamental failure to look at youth voters. Why do they miss them? Because they're still doing what? Old school polling. They're still, calling landlines. They're still calling, all these mechanisms they don't use. Young people have no interest in using and so they don't get polled correctly. And as I always say, nobody can poll an absentee ballot or vote by mail. So there's so much of the population, so many viewpoints and opinions that we miss because we fundamentally don't have the mechanisms yet for capturing views of our full citizenry. My black folks that I talk to, they always laugh and say, nobody's ever polled me for anything. And they're about right, because, I laugh because it's true. There are, whole populations that are under-surveyed. And we don't, therefore, really get down to how many people in this country are concerned. It is amazing that the latest polling data did show, right before the November elections, that there was many Americans selected, the majority of Americans selected democracy as the number one issue. The media largely, ignored it, thought it was insignificant, thought it was just people, talking. And they didn't understand how motivational it would be, because during midterms, people vote who are motivated to vote. During presidential elections, people vote because it's the thing to do. But midterm voters are very different. They come out because they're motivated. And what we saw in this last election was that young people, in particular, were motivated to show up. And when they were polled or surveyed at all, as they left polls, because they do tend to vote in person a lot, they said that democracy was a huge issue for them. Huge issue. They were very aware, very concerned with the entirety of the MAGA vote denial movement, and that they were concerned about those who are willing to throw away our democracy, those who are dominated by, their desire for absolute white male political dominance, the unregulated corporatist profit sector, the economic inequality, the failure to address climate change. They're the threat of a theocracy in our country. They showed up that to do that. I think our time right now, just like Eleanor Roosevelt was strong enough, amazing enough, bold enough to take on the mantle of coming up with the Universal Declaration of Rights, just as she welcomed into her home, sat down with, and had many a tea and many a laugh with Mary McLeod Bethune, just as she walked in a time and could envision a future that was different for the world. I believe that we need to recognize right now that we are in a new era in the fight for U.S. democracy and democracy worldwide. Without that recognition, that grounding, that understanding, we don't move forward as a nation. So let me just talk a little bit about Georgia, because I left Georgia, and I'm going to tell you, Georgia was like, sometimes it's like being in another world. And for those of you who have driven in Mississippi, Alabama, all deep south in Texas, I mean, you know that our nation is so diverse and that so many people struggle to be part of it. But I want to give much love to all the people who showed up in Georgia. Don't for a minute believe as I call it, the irresponsible press in the U.S., that Brian Kemp is this great reformist. He's one of the worst voter suppressors in the country. And let me be very clear. Why do I say that? I don't say that as hyperbole. I say that based on facts. SB 202, I saw the tragic consequences of this voter suppression law that he perpetuated, that he argued for. And I want to tell you that in what nobody's been talking about in the media is that in Georgia, for this last runoff, for this last midterms, let's start with the midterms, there were 1 million less absentee ballots cast. 1 million less. Not because people could go to the polls easily, but because SB 202 makes it so hard to do an absentee ballot. Who got devastated in that process? People say, oh, we thought Stacey Abrams had all this support, etc. But if you block 1 million voters and make absentee balloting virtually impossible for so many voters, then there are going to be consequences. One of the consequences is that nobody's talked about it, but during the midterm, the black vote went down. Who was most devastated in that? It was the black elderly. Who needs absentee ballots? The black elderly. Who needs to be able to have access to the ability to vote from home? Those who are black, those who are disabled, those who are elderly. And I'm telling you, I have no clue what would have happened if we would have had a real fair election in Georgia during the midterms. I will tell you this, that because we saw that racial data, when it came out, I was one of the first people who got a copy of it and shared it with my colleagues. They started calling me and they said, Barbara, this can't be correct. I said, it's absolutely true. I said, how in the world did this happen? These are people who have been on the ground doing this work, building this mighty infrastructure of black voter turnout in Georgia, and they were just shocked. And I said, listen, folks, it means that going into the runoffs, we got to have a whole different strategy. We got to really think about what we're going to do about this decline. How do we restore the black vote? How do we address this voter suppression? How do we deal with what's going on around the state? Not just the millions, but the other fights. As you know, we had to sue the Secretary of State in Georgia. And everybody, talk about what a great man Rassensperger is, what a great man Kemp is. Come on. We have to sue him. Why did we have to sue him? Right before before the runoff election. Because he wrote a memo telling all the counties in Georgia that they could not, did you hear me, could not offer willingly of their own volition Saturday voting. Why did he say they couldn't have Saturday voting? Because there was an old law that preceded SB 202 that said that you couldn't have an election within 2 days of a holiday. Folks, they weren't talking about Thanksgiving. What holiday do you think they were talking about that you couldn't have it on? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Try Robert E. Lee Day. Try Robert E. Lee Day. That was the holiday that they were saying that you couldn't have Saturday voting. We sued them. We pointed out the thousands of people who had voted in the year before when they had a runoff, and they hadn't contested it because they didn't, at that point, really understand what the power of the vote would look like. And so they came up with this new nonsense, and we pointed out that, hey, wait a minute, how did they change their views in 1 year? How did they allow this to happen to all these people? And of course, we won that lawsuit, and guess what, folks? Only 15 of the 159 Georgia counties offered Saturday voting, but 70,000 people showed up. 70,000 people. And this is what voter suppression does. It takes away the options that people want. 25 counties the next day had souls to the polls voting on Sunday, which has also been blocked in many states under their new voter suppression laws, the hundreds of new voter suppression laws. And I want you to know that, again, over 50,000 people showed up and Sunday voted. So when you hear this nonsense, challenge it. Long lines. I literally we commissioned these 2 big buses with John Lewis saying, "Make good trouble" on them and his image. And we took our John Lewis buses when we heard that there were long lines, 2-hour, 3-hour lines, and we went to those polling sites. We couldn't do anything but yell out the window, "Thank you for voting. Thank you for voting. Thank you for waiting in line. Thank you." And the people started dancing. They started clapping. They started shouting. They were so happy to be recognized that somebody appreciated them instead of somebody trying to take away their rights, not offering the full hours of early voting they needed, not offering the drop boxes that they needed, not offering all of the support, all the machinery they should have had, all the workers that should have been available. Somebody was out there saying, "We love you." We did so many strategies to counteract this evil voter suppression. But let me tell you something that I love that we did. We did, of course, marches, rallies, votercades, party at the polls, phone banks, called over 300,000 people just on our grouping's work. We some people did postcards early on, but there wasn't really enough time to do them. Rise to the polls, sign waving, press conferences, celebration villages, thanking voters, all of these things. But the best thing we did was we called on young people, come and be with us, to be part of our working edge as we went to these 12 counties, that they would be part of our outreach cadre. And I want to tell you, our TJC fellows, beautiful, gorgeous, from Georgia, from all over the country who came, were just remarkable. Couldn't wait to run up to a voter and say, Have you voted? Couldn't wait to give away a John Lewis button. Couldn't wait to talk to people and say, come on, let's vote. And people were saying things like, I don't think I can vote. I have an F on my report card, meaning they have a felony record. Or saying, I need a ride to the polls. So guess what we did? We gave rides to the polls. We took black elderly to the polls who couldn't use those absentee ballots. We did every single thing in our power. Don't think that it was just that there are great candidates that drew people to the polls. We got underneath and gave people that added support, that added boost, that added, ability. So where do we go from here? I'm talking in New York State, right? And I want to commend New York State because you took some great leadership in passing the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of New York on June 20, 2022 when it got enacted. And I love what it does, all the pre-clearance provisions, the anti-gerrymandering clauses, the foreign language assistance clause, the second language assistance clause, the protecting voters from intimidation, deception, obstruction, new legal tools, anti-discrimination tools, instructing judges to interpret law in favor of voters, and also creating your centralized database of demographic information. That's fabulous. Our hope is that more states will adopt a version of the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but also New York. Let's think broader. You still have the lowest voter turnout in the country. How in the world is that possible? Let's think broader because that's not an issue just of the law. It's an issue of the kind of organizing I just described that we did in Georgia. We didn't just look at the law, we looked at how do you inspire people to get involved in democracy? How do you inspire people to understand the power of their vote, their one vote? How do you do that? You got to build it. It's not natural. There's nothing in our democracy that reaches out and embraces voters. We don't even teach civics in some of our schools. Just think about the challenge. And so part of doing what we must do is to build the same ground coalitions that they built so carefully and constructed in Georgia. But we also got to do the same thing all over the state, all over the nation. I can tell you from going into state after state after state, if you're seeing a real loss of progressives, I challenge you to find an infrastructure. Because usually that's what it means, there is none. And so so we've been building TJC, the Transformative Justice Coalition. We've been building new structures in different states. We're really working through a lot of fractionalism, a lot of political disagreement, a lot of funding issues, but that's what we know is what democracy needs. Where are the democracy clubs in our country? Where is the ability to say after you elect somebody that that's not the end of democracy? Voting is just one tool, but where are the candidates accountable tools? Where are the democracy clubs? Think about it. And what I love that do voter education, that do voter training, that train up our young people to go out and to assist voters, where are those clubs? And without them, democracy dies. Without them, especially when it's under assault by anti-democracy forces, it is our obligation to not sit back, to not say, oh, well, it's just the way things are. It's our obligation. So as we look forward to the future, rapidly, wrap it up real quick. I told everyone this is a new speech, never done it before. So as we wrap up, I just want to point out a couple of things that are critical in thinking about our future of our democracy. One, women's full representation. Without women being fully represented in government, governments will fail. And especially without women of all races being fully represented. New York, your state right now, and your state legislature, sadly, looks like a whole lot of them. You only have 33% of your state legislature are women. Nationwide, only 28.5%. In the state senates are women, only 32% in state houses assemblies. You got states like Nevada that have 58.7% of women, all the way down to Rhode Island with 44.2% of women. But then you got West Virginia. What's their percentage of women in the state legislature? You want to guess? Anybody? Try 13.4%. Try Tennessee at 14.4%. Try Mississippi at 14.9%. Try Alabama at 16.7%. Try South Carolina at 17.1%. Why do you think they don't have Medicaid expansion? Why do you think they don't have free college tuition? Why do you think they don't have, support for child care? Why is it the minimum wage is so suppressed in all of those states? It's because we don't have the right representation and don't even think about women of color. The fact that we have no black woman in the U.S. Senate, and thank God for New York that you got a mighty attorney general. Tish James is just rocking this whole country. Everybody watching her. And I want you also to think about another big challenge, not only is the women, think about the Gen Z and millennials. The average age of an American in this country is 38 years old. But the average age of our politicians that sit in these state legislatures, that sit in Congress, even older, is 58. People are talking about Maxwell Alejandro Frost. They're so happy that he's been elected. He's the first Gen Zer into the U.S. Congress. But guess what? Gen Z is 16% of the population. If we had Gen Z represented, it would be 60 people in Congress, not one. And you ask, why are we off as a country? Why doesn't the public sentiment around universal health care? Why is it that the public sentiment around gun control? Why is it that the public sentiment around women's reproductive rights, why aren't they being recognized? It's because our government is off base. And it's worse in the states. In the states, the representation is for Gen Z is less than 5%. So we need to think about that. We need to really work on, promoting a new generation into office, higher numbers of women, people of color, and we need to decarcerate. You know the words here in New York. I'm not even going to get into it. But the over-incarceration of blacks, Hispanics, got to stop. We got a whole lot of work. If we actually implemented the tenets, the fundamental tenets of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, could not look the way it looks. We got to fight human trafficking. We got to fight for climate justice. We got to end war. People don't like to think that's even possible, but war is destructive. Ukraine and so many, Yemen, and all these places where we have wars, and then the silent, unacknowledged wars that permeate in our country, our globe. We got to fight income inequality. We got to fight for immigration reform. We got to fight, I believe, for reparations. But the ending point of my speech is that we, all of us in this room, everyone we know, that we must be the fighting edge of change. We have to be that tip of the spear that leads to a new era of real implementation of human rights, real implementation of a real democracy for all, real power for the people always. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Barbara, for your boldness, and I hope we all take heed. Human Rights Day is a day that I think holds tremendous meaning, as Barbara said. It's been shared quite a bit, but the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt about human rights beginning close to home is fundamental to what we do at the Division of Human Rights. Our mission is to eliminate discrimination, remedy injustice, promote equality, access, and dignity for all. For the most part, we do that through enforcement. Each year we investigate over 6,000 complaints of discrimination. However, apart from these individual cases, there are deeper and more difficult issues of hate and bias that impact our communities, our schools, our homes, and our lives. We've seen this hate and bias manifest itself in incomprehensible violence, the massacre on Black New Yorkers in Buffalo, mass shootings at LGBTQ+ clubs, attacks on Jewish community centers, attacks on Sikh houses of worships, targeting of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and many others. And beyond what we see in the news, there's been a rising tide of hate and bias that untold numbers of people encounter in their lives every day that goes unaddressed and unreported. Everyone, no matter what color they are or who they love or what they believe, should be able to feel safe when they go to work or go dancing or visit a house of worship or send their kids off to school. And so beyond celebrating Human Rights Day, we also have some news to share with you. On behalf of Governor Hochul, it's my pleasure to announce that the division is launching a statewide hate and bias prevention unit. Thank you. This year, Governor Hochul announced that a priority of her administration would be making New York a fairer, more just state for all of its residents, and she directed DHR to create a hate and bias prevention unit. The unit will lead efforts around public education, outreach, prevention, and response. It will consist of two components: regional councils made up of local community stakeholders. I love the idea of those democracy clubs. Maybe it'll become democracy clubs. And a rapid response team of specialized anti-bias professionals. It is also my pleasure to announce that we have been able to hire an extraordinarily talented individual to lead this effort on behalf of the division, Joanne Panguillion Taylor. Thank you, Joanne. Joanne is an experienced mediator who has previously worked at the New York Peace Institute, Community Mediation Services, and at the Southern District of New York's ADR program. It is my hope that with Joanne and the team she puts together, the unit will become an invaluable resource for all New Yorkers. We've been traveling across the state to identify the issues faced in different communities and regions, and to help identify who should participate on the councils and help address these issues. We learned a lot, but there's so much more we need to learn, and there are many people who remain unheard. However, to borrow Hunter College's motto, Mihi Cure Futura, I hope I did it justice, the care of the future is mine. With your partnership, we can all make a better New York State for us and for our future generation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Neuwirth, the Rita E. Hauser Director of the Human Rights Program. I want to thank Maria Imperial and her team at the New York State Division for Human Rights for celebrating Human Rights Day with us here at Roosevelt House. And I want to thank President Raab for all that she has done to make Roosevelt House the unique place that it has become. a hub of human rights education and activism. Barbara Arnwine has inspired us with her brilliant thoughts, as well as all that she has done to bring the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to life here in the U.S., and in particular to promote and protect democracy, as well as all other human rights. I want to thank her for being with us today. Human Rights Day should be a day for renewed calls to action, and the new unit of the Division for Human Rights is one such call. I hope we will all recommit to the vision of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, so carefully shepherded through the UN by Eleanor Roosevelt in the early years. It remains a document honored more in the breach than the observance. But as we look around the world and we see ordinary people taking to the streets, rising up to insist on respect for their fundamental human rights, we can renew our hope as we celebrate Human Rights Day together. And I couldn't help thinking, listening to Barbara talk, what if Eleanor Roosevelt was in this room? How thrilled she would be to have you here. She is, and to have those words spoken here, and what she would have written in her next Human Rights Day column. So thank you again for being here. I want to thank Harold Holzer, the director of Roosevelt House, and our event team led by Katrina Avila for organizing today's event. I hope you'll join us upstairs for tea and coffee and more talk about human rights. Thank you all for coming.